Greetings, WPC church family and friends. Here is our sermon recap for March 23, 2025. This week we took a look at the account of the Tower of Babel in the book of Genesis. So beginning reading in Genesis 11, chapter 1, now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. By the way, bitumen is simply tar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they all have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down, and there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth. Our subtitle for this week's message is United Against God. That comes from verse 4 in Genesis 11. It says that the people wanted to make a name for themselves, and they didn't want to be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. That was in violation of God's command. They were supposed to be fruitful and multiply and spread out, but they were rebelling against God. As a young believer, when I first read this account, I was amazed by the fact that the Lord said if he didn't disperse the people and confuse their language, that nothing they proposed they would not be able to do. At the time, I was studying music technology as a graduate student, and I was just amazed at the things we could do technologically. And as I'm reading this account, and all these folks were doing was building a tower. How is it possible that there would be nothing that they couldn't do? Well, one of the reasons we misunderstand that now is because we don't really understand just how advanced the folks were at that time. We tend to have that false idea of Flintstone Stone Age people who didn't have much technology, but they clearly had a lot of intelligence, building pyramids and doing all the things that they were doing. And so God knew how quickly they would advance, and that was why he dispersed them. So there was nothing that they would propose to do that they could not do, and as a result, the Lord sent them packing. And we see that in verses 7 and 8, where he said that he would come down and confuse their language and disperse them out over the face of the earth. We spent the remainder of the message looking at the evidence that we see today for this event and getting a little bit of an insight into how it happened. In doing so, I showed two video clips that are some of my favorite on this topic. They both come from the Institute for Creation Research. One is on language families, and the other is on Chinese pictographs. The parallels that we see to Scripture in Chinese pictographs make it pretty clear that the Chinese culture started soon after the Tower of Babel. I will put links to both of these videos in the description below. I also shared some of my favorite scientists who are heroes of the faith for me in modern days, and one of those is Dr. Jonathan Sarfati, a chemist from and the leader of Creation Ministries International, and also Dr. Jeanson, who is an astrophysicist with Biblical Science Institute. Both of these men have taught me a lot through their materials on understanding science from a biblical worldview. I now have a new hero of science faith, and that is Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson. He is from Answers in Genesis. He recently published a book called Traced. He's been doing a lot of genetic research, and a lot of what we thought we knew about world history is being upended by genetic research. Among other things, we know that many of the modern-day residents of the Americas who trace their ancestry back to the native cultures here, they have their genetic and even linguistic roots over in Central Asia. So it's kind of amazing. Dr. Jeanson references this book in his works, The Red Record. This is one of the oldest histories we have of Native peoples. Back in the 1990s, this book was disavowed because of a doctoral thesis. The person that did the thesis decided that this work must be a work of fiction, but that was because he was trying to put old ages into the story. As Dr. Jeanson did some research and started to look at the genetics and how that means that actually the Native American people arrived here more recently, that this book is actually a pretty accurate description of how the folks came here and migrated throughout the continent. And in doing so, the Native cultures have readopted this, understanding that it does represent their history. That's pretty profound. And as he relates the story of how these folks surrendered their history for a time because they thought science disproved it, I was struck by how many Christians have abandoned their faith in Scripture because they think science has disproved it. Yet the more we learn about things, everything from distant starlight to genetics to rock layers, supports the Bible and a recent creation. In his book about Traced, Dr. Jeanson has many charts and lots of information, and one here shows the genetic diversity from ancestors in Central Asia and how they divided somewhere around between 8,300 and 8,600 as part of the group migrated here to this continent. That's pretty fascinating. One of the things that spurred Dr. Jeanson on was this book published in the mid-2000s, I believe 2005, called 1491. It's a history of the indigenous peoples before Columbus arrived. We made a lot of false assumptions because we found these natives being sparsely populated, and we assumed a lot of things about them. We'll talk about that again in a little bit. But when we studied world history in school, many of us, we talk about 1492 when Columbus arrived, we talk about 1620 when the Pilgrims came, and we don't realize a lot happened in the intervening years. Estimates now show that in 1491 there were approximately 53 million people living in the Americas. That's compared to 78 million in Europe, 45 million in Africa. And we are discovering more and more that they had some fairly advanced civilizations here, including a large city in the area now known to us as St. Louis. Archaeologists are uncovering quite a bit of that information as time progresses. Some other interesting information that Dr. Jeanson shares, this comes from a secular publication, actually an evolutionist publication, which shows as they've done soil research in the rainforest, they are realizing the rainforest has only existed as we know it today for a little over 200 years. Before that, it was cultivated by mankind, as shown in this chart, and as late as the late 1500s, corn was being planted there, which is pretty amazing and kind of mind-blowing. In the book 1491, the author points out that we are learning so much information so quickly from archaeology, and then Dr. Jeanson also points out from genetic research and from linguistic research, we are learning so much about how the tribes interacted with each other, how their histories intermingle, and all of it from Dr. Jeanson's perspective comes into focus when we look at the Tower of Babel as a real event, and we realize that this is recent history, not spread out over very long ages. Having said that, Charles Mann, who wrote this book, is not a believer in a young earth, but he does point out some of our false assumptions that, and I would say I was guilty of these too, that the natives who were found here were unchanged holdovers from our ancient past, that they were Stone Age cultures that just never advanced, that they were remnants of ancient ages. But we know now that that wasn't true. They possessed great technologies. That city in the center part of the continent, at its heyday, rivaled the size of London in Europe at the same time. And so we're learning more and more as time goes by. And Dr. Jeanson has many hours of material on YouTube. I will put links to 2 summary videos below that you can check out. Those videos will have links to even more information if you want to dive in even deeper. But it is all really very, very fascinating. So all of that was just to set up an understanding of the fact that the Tower of Babel is a real event, that actually happened in history. Next week, we will continue with the Tower of Babel and take a look at what the implications are for us as believers today in the modern world and what it means to us in the church. So I hope you'll be able to join us this coming Sunday. You're always welcome here at WPC. In the meantime, may God bless your week, and may you live at peace and shine bright. Thank you, my friends. Hope to see you soon.
Shout for joy, O citizens of heaven, shout aloud.